Bimbo had been in labor for hours. The contractions came harder, sharper, and the midwives could see the distress building on her face. Her husband, Michael, stood beside her bed, gripping her hand as she struggled through every breath. They had prepared for this day, packed the hospital bag, chosen the best hospital they could afford, and trusted that everything would go smoothly. But by early afternoon, signs of fetal distress were becoming impossible to ignore. The nurse checked Bimbo again, her expression tightening. "We need to move her for an emergency operation," she said quietly. "We've called the doctor." Michael nodded frantically. "Okay, so where is he? Let's go." But minutes began to stretch. 5 minutes turned into 10, 10 into 20. The nurse returned, avoiding his eyes. "We're still trying to reach him." Bimbo cried out in pain, her voice breaking. "Please, please help my baby." Michael could feel panic clawing at his chest. He rushed to the nurse's desk, his voice trembling with fear. "You said he was on call. Where is he? Bring someone else. Anyone. My wife is suffering." "We don't have another consultant available at the moment," one of the senior nurses said. "We've called him several times." "But where is he?" Michael demanded. "Is he even in the hospital? Is he asleep? Out? You're not telling me anything." They didn't answer. He ran back to the room just as another contraction racked Bimbo's body. The monitor beside her beeped in slow, irregular patterns. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. 30 more minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Finally, the doctor rushed in, hurriedly pulling on gloves, speaking fast, offering explanations no one asked for. But it was too late. The moment they moved Bimbo to the theater and examined her again, the room fell silent. The baby was gone. Bimbo's cries echoed through the room fell silent. The baby was gone. Bimbo's cries echoed through the corridor, raw, heart-shattering, unbelieving. Michael felt something inside him break. He couldn't even cry at first. He just stood there, frozen, numb, his hands shaking. Then came the anger. He stormed out of the theater waiting area and went straight to the administrative office. When he spoke, his voice was a mixture of grief, fury, and disbelief. "My wife came here to deliver a living child. She trusted you. I trusted you. You told us she would be safe. But your doctor wasn't here when we needed him. You kept telling us he was on the way, and now my child is dead." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "You failed her. You failed my family. You failed a baby who didn't even get a chance to take a breath." The hospital manager tried to calm him, tried to use words like protocols, delays, and unforeseen circumstances, but nothing could justify what had happened. Michael slammed his fist on the desk. "I will not let this go. I want answers, I want accountability, and I want every single person responsible to face the consequences." Outside, Bimbo lay in her hospital bed, empty arms wrapped around her stomach, tears soaking the sheets. Nothing could fill the silence where her baby's heartbeat should have been. And weeks passed, and life at home was a shadow of what it had been. The apartment felt too quiet. Every corner seemed to echo absence. Michael went back to work, but his mind never left the hospital hallways or the crib in their bedroom. Bimbo stayed home mostly, drifting from room to room, staring at the tiny clothes they would never use, or at the empty bassinet, her grief a heavy cloak. One morning, Michael found her sitting on the floor, holding a small blanket. She didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge him. He knelt beside her. "I know it hurts," he said softly, "but we'll survive this, together." She shook her head, tears streaming silently. "I keep imagining, what if I had screamed louder? What if I had done something differently?" Michael took her hands in his, firm and steady. Nothing could have changed what they did. This was their failure, not yours. You were perfect, Bimbo, perfect. Days later, the lawyer contacted them. The hospital had tried to sweep the case under the rug, offering apologies and vague compensation, but Michael refused to back down. Every meeting he attended, every phone call he made, he carried Bimbo's grief like armor. She started joining him, sitting quietly in the lawyer's office, holding his hand. Her presence reminded him why he couldn't give up. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with hospital representatives, Bimbo finally spoke. "I don't want revenge," she said, voice hoarse. I just want them to voice hoarse. I just want them to remember, so no one else loses their baby like we did." Michael nodded, squeezing her hand. "That's why we fight. Not for anger, for justice, so this pain doesn't happen again." Slowly, Bimbo began to reclaim pieces of herself. She returned to her old hobbies, started taking walks again, and even allowed herself small moments of laughter. Michael encouraged her, never pushing, never asking her to move on faster than she could. One quiet night, she walked into the nursery and sat on the floor beside the crib. She touched the tiny blankets and whispered, "We love you. We always will." Michael joined her silently, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They didn't need words. Together they let themselves grieve, letting the memory of their baby live in quiet rituals, a folded blanket, a photo, a name whispered in the dark. The legal battle dragged on, and though it wasn't easy, they slowly began to find strength in each other. Michael's anger became focused, purposeful, a tool for justice rather than a weight dragging him down. Bimbo's grief became a quiet determination, a promise to herself and their lost child that the negligence they suffered would not happen to another family. And while the emptiness never fully disappeared, the silence in their home began to feel a little less suffocating, softened by shared memory, love, and an unbroken bond. Their baby might never return, but their fight, their love, and their memory of them would endure. Months later, the courtroom was tense, sterile, and silent, every sound echoing like a drumbeat of anticipation. Michael and Bimbo sat side by side, their hands intertwined tightly. The hospital representatives lounged confidently on the other side, but Michael didn't flinch. He had prepared for this moment for months, fueled by grief, anger, and determination. The lawyer stood, addressing the judge. "Your Honor, this case is not merely about compensation. It is about accountability, about ensuring that no family ever suffers due to negligence like this again." The hospital tried to downplay the delay. "There was no malicious intent," one representative argued. "We acted as quickly as possible under the circumstances." Michael leaned forward, voice steady but sharp. "No malicious intent? My child died while your doctor was on call but absent. 48 minutes of inaction. My wife begged for help, and you tell me there was no negligence?" The courtroom was silent. Bimbo's eyes glistened as she squeezed Michael's hand. She had rehearsed nothing, spoken nothing, yet here, surrounded by strangers and authority, her presence spoke volumes. The lawyer presented the evidence, timestamps of calls, hospital logs, testimonies from nurses, even the minute-by-minute monitor readings showing the baby's distress. It was meticulous, damning, undeniable. Weeks passed in hearings, cross-examinations, and appeals. Michael and Bimbo attended every session, supporting each other, silently drawing strength from shared grief. Outside the courtroom, reporters tried to approach them, but Michael's focus was unyielding. They were there for one reason: justice. Finally, the verdict came. The judge's voice was measured, deliberate. The court finds that the hospital failed in its duty of care, and that such failure directly contributed to the loss of the child. The hospital is held accountable and must implement immediate reforms to prevent future tragedies. Bimbo exhaled, a long, shuddering breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Michael pulled her close, his own tears threatening to spill. They didn't celebrate. There was no laughter, no joy in victory, but there was validation, acknowledgement, and a sense that their pain had forced change. That night, at home, Bimbo walked into the nursery. The empty crib still stood, tiny clothes folded neatly, but the air felt different, less like defeat, more like remembrance. Michael joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We did it. Not for us, but for them. For every family that could have gone through what we did." Bimbo rested her head on his chest. "I'll never forget. But maybe someday this won't feel like the end." They stayed there, in the quiet room, holding each other. The baby's memory lingered in the shadows, but so did hope. A fragile, persistent light that neither grief nor injustice could fully extinguish. And outside, the hospital began changing policies, training staff, and implementing emergency protocols because two parents refused to let a preventable tragedy be forgotten.